Well, folks, welcome in to another edition of the LCFP. This is your host, Laner, and we have got the one and only, the great Johnny Lane on the pod.
Excited to be here as always, Laner.
Let's go, Johnny. Hey, you joined for the craziest week in the college football calendar. I mean, what else could we possibly fit into this week? The coaching carousel finally happened basically on Sunday. Early national signing day started today, but it's a period. It's today, tomorrow, and Friday. We're recording on Wednesday night, December 3rd. We also are coming off of rivalry week. We're heading into conference championship weekend. And on Sunday, they're going to announce the playoff field. I don't know if of a sport that could possibly fit more into one week. It's crazy.
I'm with you. It's the culmination of pretty much everything. All things next year and wrapping up this year, meeting at one time. It is a very crazy time. What's always funny is to think back a year ago today and be like, wow, look at all everything that happened during that early December, late November week. And then where are we at today, right? A lot of teams are in very, very different positions than they were a year ago. And some of them are as a result of signing days, new coaches, whatever it might be. But then also going into the postseason, there's still plenty of ball left to be played this year.
Yeah, Johnny, what a point. I mean, even just let's just pluck a few names out of the hat. South Carolina, very different place than they were a year ago. They were a CFP bubble team hoping to get a shot. This year, well below 500, not even going bowling. Their season is over.
Hmm.
Penn State, I think right at the moment, have signed two recruits. They don't have a head coach still. And last year they were a heading into the playoffs, getting geared up for the Big Ten championship game. Wild. Anyone
Yeah.
else that you're just like, dude, think about this program or this team that's just like in a completely different spot. I mean, obviously LSU.
Yeah. LSU's a big one. You can go with Clemson as well. I'm not quite sure how their signing day worked out today. I know that they lost a few recruits, but everybody really did. But yeah, that's a program that last year they were in the playoff. They won their first game. They did not win their first game of the playoff, but they won the ACC. They got that bid, and then now preseason, one of the favorites really to win the national championship. And then you look back and it's like, whoa, where did they fall off the tracks?
Yeah. We talked about it. I think you and I were talking about this the other day. We'll have to pull it up, but in our preview episode, we talked about how that Clemson, South Carolina, Palmetto State rivalry might have huge implications. And I literally didn't even watch a snap of it this past weekend because it was irrelevant in regards to the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a game that I specifically highlighted. I was very excited about that one preseason. I thought it was going to have implications for both teams in the postseason, heading into this past season. But another game I wanted to point out would be UF versus FSU. That was a game
Yeah.
that even in our home state, like it's a game that a lot of people are very passionate about. A lot of kids from this area go to FSU or go to UF. UCF is also in that bundle, but specifically those two schools, very passionate fan bases. And that game just it was not hyped up at all. It had no implications for playoffs or anything. Both
Yeah.
sub 500 teams, typically a very, very good rivalry game, and just kind of got swept under the rug.
Dude, no kidding. Wow, Johnny, what a pull early on here. That's good stuff. Well, folks, once again, thank you for joining us on the pod. This is the LCFP. That's the Laners College Football Pod. And all season, we have been powered by our good friends at Duck Buck. I'm rocking the hat. Johnny, today, I'm rocking the pocket tee as well. Check it out.
There it is.
Right there, baby. Duck Buck Co. on the pocket tee. They've been so gracious to us all year, and you guys have been using the code. They've given us code LCFP. It's just four simple letters, makes it super easy. And they'll give you 15% off at duckbuckco.com. Thank you to all the people over there. Shout out to Carter and the whole crew. We appreciate you guys. But today we're going to be talking about in this full episode, if you're listening in, we're also going to cut up some different segments on YouTube. So make sure you're following and sub to our YouTube page. But we're going to give you a rivalry week recap. We're going to give you conference championship game previews, our college football playoff rankings reactions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the head coaching carousel and how all of that has kind of culminated with maybe a few closing thoughts on maybe some early national signing day talk and maybe just wherever the wind takes us, Johnny. But Johnny, thanks again for jumping in, man. Any takeaways from rivalry weekend.
Yeah, rivalry weekend looked very different for various different teams and specifically within the top 12, right? You had Ohio State playing in the big game, which is typical. A weaker Michigan team this year. They finally overcame that drought, the winless drought against Michigan. I think that this was the year everyone was kind of like, all right, this has to be the year that Ohio
Yep.
State beats Michigan. They did it, but then you look one ranking beneath that is Indiana, and Indiana had to go play Purdue this past weekend, which is
Yeah.
drastically different than one below them, which was Texas A&M, who had to go play Texas. There were very very significant differences in the challenges that were posed to these top 12, 15-ish teams. Um, and I do have to say, like, Indiana kind of got a rest week per se. Notre Dame kind of got a rest week. BYU, they had to didn't really have a rivalry in there. There were a few other schools too. You could say Ole Miss kind of had a week off in a way. I mean, Mississippi State's been a decent opponent this year, but then you look at some other teams, and Oregon going to play Washington, and Georgia playing Georgia Tech. There were just varying differences in some of those games, and you can highlight Alabama going to play Auburn as well. So that kind of changes the landscape of things. I think going into conference tournament season, a very well rested, I believe, Indiana team set to face off against Ohio State. I know that we'll get into that in a little bit, but there is
Yeah.
something to be said about teams that really had a challenge this past week, and then teams that kind of had it on coast mode.
That's an interesting point, Johnny. And we didn't plan to get too into this, but I do want to highlight that because I think you're noticing everyone last year was year one of the 12 team era, and everyone in hindsight now gives Ryan Day and Ohio State a lot of credit for getting hot at the right time of year. Some of that maybe you can control, some of that you probably can't. I think about baseball and the MLB and the World Series, and even in college, the college level, the College World Series, and how it's not always the best team that wins the championship or wins the World Series. It's the team that gets hot at the right time. And I think that in college football, now that there's actually multiple rounds in the playoff, it's not just a 4 team playoff or a 1 game BCS national championship. But if you're going to win this thing, you're going to have to win 3 or 4 games. And some teams maybe even play in 5 postseason games if they were to play in their conference championship, lose it, and then play in the first round in the CFP, that it is a big factor. Like we're talking about teams that are going to be having to play 2, 3, 4, 5 extra games. And then on top of that, you're having to talk about teams that have gone through very different schedules. And I know we're kind of in the transition mode of wrapping up rivalry week and heading into conference championship weekend, but I looked at some of those teams and they look beaten down. And like you said, other teams, they look energized. They look ready to go. They look like they're trending in the right direction, even just health and injury and like energy wise. And I think it's pretty obvious. Like an Ohio State team hasn't really had to go through a gauntlet this year. They were pretty much like they played 6 teams below 500 leading up to that Michigan game. Yes, man, all the credit in the world. They got the monkey off the back. They went on the road in the big house, hostile environment. They broke the curse. And by the way, Johnny, side note, I hate that stupid number that everybody was throwing out there, like over 2,000 days since Ohio State beat Michigan. Let's not forget that in 2020, Michigan canceled the game. That was a 2-4 Michigan team, Johnny, that would have got boat raced by Ohio State. So I hate that stupid number. I'm happy for Ohio State that they got the monkey off their back. But man, on the other side of things, you mentioned Indiana as well, coasting through that Purdue game. And that hasn't been a significant rivalry in a long time. So all the credit in the world to Indiana for becoming a significant team. But then you look at the SEC championship game, and I feel like Georgia and Alabama are limping into that game,
Mhm.
especially Alabama. You can talk about injuries and banged up and trending in the wrong direction. I think that Alabama checks all those boxes right now.
Absolutely. And but one thing I do want to point out, and a lot of people have failed to see this. I know that the CFP chair spoke about Alabama moving up in the rankings, and we'll talk about that. But Alabama did cover the spread this weekend. So I know I'm not huge into the betting world and all this stuff, but before the game, the spread was set at 5 points. Bama was favored by 5 points. Look back at the score, and I know it went down to the wire, but Alabama won by 7 points. So statistically, they performed better than the experts would have thought that they performed. A lot of people fail to see that, right? Auburn
Yeah.
was a really, really underrated team. And I'm not gonna say, oh, they play in the SEC and they're better than their record. They were not a complete team by any means. But there were flashes of Auburn this year. Their defense gave a lot of people trouble, and they have talent across the board. New head coach, guy fighting for the job. Um, there were a lot of different factors playing at Jordan Hare in that rivalry matchup. It's an in-state rivalry, which makes it a little bit different than the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. Um, but I believe there was 92 players from the state of Alabama represented in that game,
Yeah.
which is incredible. And it shows, pretty much every fan in the crowd probably knew a kid that played football in their hometown.
Yeah.
So very significant in that regard. But yeah, that game was a lot of people would say, "Oh, Alabama look terrible. They look terrible." Yeah, they didn't look great in the second half, but at the end of the day, they still performed statistically better than
Yeah.
experts thought that they were going to perform.
The best take I've heard on it too, Johnny, was this was like the opposite of the Alabama Oklahoma game. Auburn outplayed Alabama in most categories in this game. Statistically, they severely outgained Alabama passing. Um, at times, their defense looked elite. They had an excellent pass rush. They had pressure on Ty Simpson all day. It was really just the turnover battle that Alabama won, and the timely plays on fourth downs where they came up huge. I want to put a pin in Auburn, and I want to come back and talk about them at the end of our episode when we talk about the new coaching hires and Alex Golish, because I have a thought there that's not new, but that's going to be I think that Auburn fans will resonate with it big time.
Yeah.
But
I will say,
um,
I
yeah,
want to highlight two teams that impressed me this past weekend. Oregon impressed me.
yeah,
That was a underrated win. They did it pretty handily. There wasn't any concern about them winning that game. And then number two, not necessarily a rivalry, but a game that has given this team trouble in the past. And their back was against the wall. They're on the bubble, but Miami. They came out, they
yes.
boat raced Pitt, a team that was playing for an ACC championship bid, playing for a playoff bid chance essentially, and they boat raced them on the road in cold weather. Have to highlight those two teams and give another shout out to Vanderbilt as well. They took care of business against
Oh my
Tennessee.
gosh. We could talk about all this stuff for so long. Miami, for a second, Johnny, looked excellent. That's a
Mhm.
game that back in, off the top of my head, I want to say 2017. Mark Richt was the coach of Miami at the time. They were the number two team in the country, heading into one of, very clearly going to be one of the four teams in the playoff. They went on the road last game of the year, cold weather pit, lost the game, lost their chances to be in the playoff. This was a big deal, man. They went up there, they took care of business. We talked about this. Notre Dame and Miami, we're going to talk about this later when we talk about the playoff rankings. Two very different style of football, right? Both excellent defenses. They have their identities on defense, but on the offensive side of the ball, Notre Dame has a lot more firepower and they rely on the explosive play a lot more, whereas Miami's a little more methodical, shorter passing game. Yes, Malachi Tony, best freshman in the country, at least on the offensive side of the ball, I would say. Set records there this year. Broke Xavier Restrepo's receiving record, Johnny, which is just
Yeah,
insane as a freshman, but a very different style of football. You watch a Notre Dame game, you're going to see Jeremiah Love bust a 70-yard run. You're going to see CJ Carr throw a 50-yard bomb. Like, that's the style of play Notre Dame has, so it tends for them to run it up more. Miami actually won by a wider margin than Notre Dame did in the exact same situation on the road at Pitt in a cold weather game. Coming up from South Florida, that's a big deal, man. Huge win for Miami. Great job pointing that out. Hey, do you have any other thoughts on the Vandy game, man? If not, I got a lot of love there.
yeah. I mean, you can hit on it if you'd like to. We can talk about this all day. Vandy is completely and utterly getting disgraced right now in these rankings. That was the first time that game has been relevant, outside of last year,
Yes.
in a long time. And Vandy took care of business. Pavia showed why he should be the Heisman winner. He led that team in the second half to an obliteration of Tennessee in the second half, and some devastated fans in Knoxville.
Oh, yeah. And if we're going to talk about common opponents with Miami and Notre Dame at Pitt, let's talk about this common opponent on the road in Neyland at Rocky Top. Georgia very well could have lost that game in regulation. Tennessee misses the chance to get the game winning field goal. Game goes to overtime. Georgia wins. Vandy went into Knoxville, end of the year. Tennessee, healthy team. Aguilar, experienced at this point, and on the road, in-state rivals went and won this game. Not just won it by almost 20, Johnny. Can't say enough good things about Vandy, man. And Vandy had a great day on the recruiting trail as well today. So big time, what was that third game you mentioned?
I mentioned Oregon.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Johnny, what was great about that game, man, was Oregon handled Washington. Washington was never in the game, and that's a very talented quarterback in Damon Williams Jr. Jed Fish there, year two. That's a good Washington football team, man. They
yeah,
beat Michigan by a significant chunk this year.
yeah,
Good team. Oregon handled them, shut them down, never let them in the game.
yeah. Another team that kind of scraped by without having to really get tested was Texas Tech as well. Failed to mention them earlier, but going to West Virginia, I mean, that's just not. There's got to be something more in a rivalry week for me.
Yeah. Hey, so let's close this section with this thought too, just because I mentioned it at the beginning in a fun and exciting way of like there's so much going on in college football this week. It's such an exciting time to be a fan. But on the negative side, it also highlights the problem with the college football calendar, which I think is so obvious for everyone to see that like, hey, most of these schools that have job openings, one, shouldn't be allowed to hire coaches before the season's over, but they have to because signing day is literally today. So you
Mm.
have coaches that have been in a program less than 3 days, like probably still moving there, don't have a home, don't even have their office set up, less than 3 days, and they're recruiting kids to come be at the school that they haven't even been a part of yet. So it's broken, but one of the pieces that's broken about rivalry week, and they did a good job, Johnny, like with makeshift stuff. But with these expanded, beefed up conferences, we do lose some of our typical rivals. For example, even Oregon, Washington, like that works. I'm good with it. I give it thumbs up. But typically, this would be Apple Cup week where
Right.
Washington is playing Washington State, Oregon's playing Oregon State. BYU, you mentioned, they used to be an independent. They played UCF. Like, that's obviously not a rivalry game. Like, Texas Tech and West Virginia, like, okay, there's probably bad beef there, but that's not a rivalry game either. So we did miss out on some rivalry games, but I will give some of these conferences credit. They did a good job. Like the Oregon Washington thing, like that's a win, right? Those are rivals. They're not like the top rivals with each other, but it works. But we do
Mhm.
see some cases where it's like, why is BYU playing at UCF on rivalry week? Clearly not a rival. So I did want to point that out. That's one of the negatives of these expanded conferences. But folks, there you have it. There's our recap on rivalry week.